What discussion of characters would be complete without at least some mention of E.M. Forster's distinction between flat and round characters? Not ours, anyway. This is ground that's been well covered by like every introductory textbook, craft guide, fiction writing class, and probably most college-level literature classes to some degree. So what can we say about it that hasn't been said already? A few useful things, I hope. So even if it's familiar, I'm going to take a crack at it with the hopes of putting a new spin on the topic for the initiated. And for those of you who may not know what the hell I'm talking about, or even who E.M. Forster is, flatness and roundness of characters is perhaps the most common way literary folks talk about characters. So what does it mean? Well, E.M. Forster was a very highly regarded British novelist of the early 20th century. And like almost every highly regarded novelist of any era, Forster had a few thoughts about the art of writing fiction, which he shared in a series of lectures at Trinity College, Cambridge in 1927. Also, Forster did as novelists do and wrote down said thoughts into a book titled Aspects of the Novel, which sold many copies. This was one of the early craft guides on which many subsequent fiction writing guides are based. It's a quick and useful read if you're interested, but by no means is it critical reading if you're not. Anyway, perhaps the most enduring concept Forster shared in these lectures is the distinction between flat and round characters. So how did he discuss these categories and why? Forster believed that one could sort literary characters into the flat and round piles, essentially. Jane Eyre, round. Tom Buchanan, flat. What did Forster mean by this exactly? You might think of a flat character as a type or even a caricature. One might sum up flat characters, as Forster expresses them, as a character who can be described in one sentence. For example, Tom Buchanan is an all-around awful guy and entitled bully. That pretty much covers Tom. Though it's usually the instinct of critics, scholars, and laypeople alike to brush aside flat characters as less desirable, Forster, quite correctly in my view, takes a nuanced approach to flat characters. He wrote, "A novel that is at all complex often requires flat people as well as round, and the outcome of their collisions parallels life." Forster points out several advantages of flat characters: that they're easily recognized and remembered, perform clearly delineated roles, and seldom confuse the reader by doing unpredictable things. Sometimes they're an important character like a beloved teacher or guide on a journey like Mr. Miyagi or Gandalf. And sometimes their function is their title like Glinda the Good Witch or the Wicked Witch of the West. Flat characters are very often necessary parts of the world that need to exist for the story worlds of deeper, rounder characters to seem as real or as vivid as they do. So what is a round character then? A round character, as Forster puts it, has the incalculability of life about it, life within the pages of a book. They're larger literary accomplishments, according to Forster. They give the impression of real, fully fleshed out people, and they have the power to move readers, as Forster puts it, to feelings beyond mere humor or appropriateness. With a round character, in concert with other characters, flat or otherwise, Forster states, the novel achieves the task of acclimatization and harmonizes the human race with the other aspects of his work. To my ears, this sounds an awful lot like the second part of our definition of what fiction should do: instructs and explores the nature of the human condition. Again, we seem to be reaching the same distinction we grappled with regarding popular versus literary fiction. Forster gave a theory for determining whether a character is round. He states, it is capable of surprising in a convincing way. If it never surprises, it is flat. If it does not convince, it is a flat pretending to be round. Thus, for Forster, roundness hinged on two things: the ability to surprise and the ability to do so convincingly. This may be a good place to start, and perhaps it describes many round characters, but I think we'd be better off looking deeper than surprise as our barometer. For starters, a flat character should be just as convincing as a round character. That's a given. An unconvincing character isn't a character but an author's mistake. However, I could draw up a long list of round characters whose actions don't particularly surprise, but through the sheer verisimilitude of their narratives they convince me of their roundness because Experiencing their story forces me to explore humanity, the deeper things that touch the shared tragedy and beauty of living a life. I'm not sure there's a heuristic for this in the way Forster proposes, certainly not a test as simple as his. But I think if writers aspire beyond the very difficult minimum of good fiction, that it must at least entertain, then they should probably aspire to write at least one round character into their stories, and sometimes more. This is certainly one of the more difficult and vague targets to hit as fiction writers. Hopefully, through this survey of character attributes, you'll have the tools at hand to at least take aim. In addition to the topics we've covered in this section, I'd also refer you back to the plot lesson on dilemma and conflict, and the exercise in the accompanying book pertaining. Understanding your characters' inner worlds is an invaluable guidepost in creating convincing and, dare I say it, even round characters. Starting with a sense for their depth of knowledge, their obligations, their wishes, as well as their past history, personality, quirks, and flaws. All these things will help to start an author with a sense for who their character is. These things will give the writer the feeling of a complete person, for if you as the writer don't sense a fully realized person in your story, I think you'll be hard-pressed to convince your reader of the same. In any case, lofty as the target may be, all writers have roughly the same tools for building characters: description, both abstract and concrete, character actions, and dialogue. How those actions implicitly characterized through behavior, environment, and in relation to other characters. The character's role, whether agent or patient, and how it changes over the course of the story. And how the character's actions mark them as some shade of good or bad in the reader's mind. All those choices are going to add up to the sum of your characters, which, if you do a great job, may result in a discussion among book nerds or students somewhere as to whether your character is flat or round. And if that ever happens, regardless of the verdict, you've done your job. If people care enough about your characters to think about them and talk about them, well done, you've made it. You're writing something real. Here's hoping. Now we've talked about plot, narration, and characters. It's high time we said a few words about that dynamic story world, the spaces and places your characters inhabit. Buckle up, my intrepid fellow writers. There's a story world out there, and we're going in.